I am actually going to be kicking this off with the first talk, and my talk is going to be about well-being and thriving in a crazy world. And we are in a bit of a crazy world these days, aren't we? I mean, seriously. I found this and I had to share this here because I thought it's so appropriate for all of us. You know, in 100 years from now, people are going to be looking back and going, what the heck did those people do? And what were they going through, you know, the last 5 years? And I would actually even predict, or whatever you want to call it, that it will be included in the next coming 5 years, that we're still going to have a lot of turbulence and a lot of different things going on in the world. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Karin Volo, and I'm the director of Evolution Academy. And Evolution Academy is a company where our purpose is bringing joy to the workplace. And we've been recognized in a number of places as one of the top 10 organizational development companies. And just this year, we have been recognized as the best employee engagement training provider in Europe in 2023. So I'm really proud of that, with myself and the team that we're working with and really helping to transform cultures. I'm going to share as much as I can here today with you. And basically what we're going to be covering is a lot of information in a short amount of time. But on a personal level, I just want to share with you that sometimes when life changes to become harder, you have to change yourself to become stronger. And if you saw my picture on the advertisements for this, I have long hair and now I don't. And so just on a personal level, this year has been pretty crazy for me because I've gone through stage 4 cancer and I'm now recovering and fully cancer free, but it's been a heck of a journey. And when those tough things happen in our life, we can use them as catalysts. I've gone through some other challenging things in my life, and it's always been really difficult during that time, but then afterwards it becomes a catalyst to help us grow and to develop and to kind of put us on our purpose and, why we're here and what we're meant to be doing. And I do believe that we can change that. And it's all through the growth and how we develop ourselves. So what I'm going to be talking about today is covering a lot of information. I'll talk briefly about some global trends that I see, the impact that it's having, come up with some ideas and solutions. And definitely, I always love to give tools and resources, and also promise how you can take it further if that might be something of interest for you as well. So, we're living in this time, and I call it crazy world and crazy times because there are so many things that are happening out there. But the bottom line is that we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. Things are happening on a global basis. There's wars, there's pandemics, there's all sorts of things that are actually making our personal lives somewhat unstable and, having to deal with a lot of uncertainty. We are dealing with a lot of change, and we'll get into specifically like how much change is coming. And then we're also dealing with a lot of stress. And these are all kind of interrelated, interwoven, but they're all also standalone on their own. And how we manage to get through these times is really if we have tools, that we can make it through a lot easier. And if we don't, it becomes rather challenging, right? So let's talk about some of these trends and go a little bit deeper into this. When you think about uncertainty, what emotions do you experience when you are feeling uncertain? And if you're available and can make some comments, that would be great. If not, that's fine. Basically, when I've had this type of a conversation, the emotions that come up, 95 to 98% tend to be kind of negative emotions. You can have a lot of anxiety, you can be very nervous, there's stress, you feel helpless, a lot of frustration, anger, oftentimes sadness, and it all kind of relates to having this lack of control of what's going on in your life, right? What do all of those emotions have in common? They are actually all based in, they're all based in fear, right? And if we can acknowledge that and understand that and learn to manage our own emotional state, it makes it easier to handle all the things that are happening in the world outside of us, because we have a lot of chaos around us. Part of this chaos is because there's so much change coming, and change can be often frightening for some people. Other people, they embrace change and it looks, like an opportunity, right? The one thing I can definitely say is that change is constant. We are in a point now, though, that we are going to and are in the middle of experiencing more change than we've ever experienced in our lives before. This is a graph that came from Peter Diamandis, and he, talks about this accelerated growth or exponential change. And a lot of it is due because of AI, robotics, 3D printing, all these new technologies that are coming. And, in the next, we're in the middle of it now, from 4 years, from 2022 to 2026, we're going to be experiencing the equivalent of the last 100 years of change. So that's a lot of change in a short amount of time. If you think about someone starting university in 2022, chances are whatever they're studying might even be obsolete by the time they finish their 4-year degree. So a lot of change is happening for everyone, including, it doesn't matter which generation you are. The good news about this, and I always love to share good news whenever I can because we get bombarded by so much bad news, is that we are adaptable. Humans are adaptable, and we're going to make it through this. We can, manage to learn all these new different things. And if you think about how our behaviors have changed just through technology, there's a saying that I came across in 2000, and I've lived by that ever since. It's life is change is constant, and growth is optional. So we have a choice on how we can manage this change, right? And how do we get through this? If we talk about stress, that's one of the things that's kind of everyone is experiencing all over the world. And why are we so stressed? We all have 24 hours in a day. What is it that we're doing that is making things go so that we do feel so stressed? It's kind of interesting. If I don't know if you agree, but I definitely feel like time has sped up. Things are going much, much faster. And what I find fascinating is that Gallup is doing a lot of research now and asking a lot of questions around stress. So what they found in their latest State of the Global Workplace report that came out earlier this year is that 44% of people are experiencing a lot of stress daily at work, which is, if you look at it, the root cause of a lot of diseases out there. Up to 80% of diseases that we experience is related to stress in some way. So, it's kind of interesting, especially if we think about how we're talking about mental health and well-being right now. Again, I see it as an exciting trend or shift that we're actually able to have these conversations because it's addressing kind of the elephant that's been in the room for a really long time in terms of dealing with stress and at work and how that is related to. I've heard a figure that, on Monday mornings, like that's the most common occurrence for heart attacks. And it's because people don't want to go to work. So it's kind of a sad thing. And it's a sad state of the workplace when you can come up with these kind of figures. And this is why it's so important to work with culture, to create an environment where people can thrive, because if that's stable for people at work, it helps to make everything else much easier for their lives as well. When I said we're talking about well-being, again, Gallup is starting to do a lot of research around this, and I think it's pretty interesting. And the impact of well-being goes far beyond kind of how people feel at work. It's affecting the number of sick days that people are taking. It's also looking about their job performance and how, are they able to do their job? There's a lot of burnout. We'll get into figures here in just a second. But, if people are not dealing with their well-being and mental health and well-being, it leads to burnout, which is like the end of the rope for people. And you shouldn't let people get that far. And then, of course, it's always related to employee turnover and how, people are feeling at work and if they need to leave and if they're choosing to leave. What I love about Gallup's work is that they're able to kind of put it into concrete numbers so people can really understand this. So some of their more recent figures coming out about well-being at work was basically 75% of medical costs are due mostly for preventable conditions, which is pretty sad if you think about it. I mean, if we can prevent these things, why aren't we doing more around this to basically be able to handle taking care of people and showing people how they can thrive at work? They've also calculated this 322 billion of turnover and lost productivity cost is globally because of employee burnout. And I was always very curious, how do they come up with those numbers? And it's a combination of productivity, it's a combination of employee turnover, and then the health costs that people are experiencing at work, when they are getting sick because of burnout and things like that. They've also found that 20 million of additional lost opportunity for every 10,000 workers basically due because they're struggling and they're suffering. And so again, if the employer or the company can create a culture and an environment where people can do well and thrive, they're going to cut out so many costs and save themselves a lot of money. So it's definitely worthwhile to be proactive on this rather than reactive and trying to, scramble to take care of people who, could have avoided burnout and being too stressed. And then it's also, 15 to 20% of the total payroll in voluntary turnover is also due to burnout. So there's a definite correlation. We're not at the point yet where like the healthcare system is holding the employers liable for health costs in most countries. But we might get to that point because I think employers really need to understand how to not have their employees too stressed so that they are having these health crises in their life. I think it's quite important. So I often hear with working with companies out there that they want this high performance culture. Everybody wants to have that. And what we do at Evolution is kind of drill down to how does that look? How do we actually get to that? And if you look at the bottom of this, you have your thoughts and then you have your emotions and the two arrows that are kind of pointing, and it goes around in a circle because sometimes our thoughts will trigger our emotions and vice versa. Sometimes emotions will trigger thoughts, but both of those will lead to our behaviors, which leads to our actions, and that leads to our results. So when you want a high performance culture, people are often looking at just the actions or might be looking at the behaviors, but they're not going underneath. Like, how do you have joy at work? How do you experience excitement? How do you get people engaged and happy to go to work on Monday morning? One of my favorite CEOs out there, Gary Ridge, used to be the CEO of WD-40. He says, send people home happy, not crappy. And I love that because it does make such a difference because we do spend the majority of our time at the workplace and basically having to deal with, most of our time there. And if it's not a happy environment or not a place where people are feeling really good, then it has an impact on not just at the workplace, but also how they go home and how they are parents and spouses, and then it ripples into our society. So it's a big thing to look at. But if we can get to the root cause, then we can start to really shift things and make things much better there as well. So, like I said, at Evolution, we talk a lot about emotions and to really kind of identify them. And this is a tool I developed many years ago. And I call it the joyometer because I figure, we can measure our joy and see where we are. And I love sharing this because it just makes people realize like what their emotional state is. And here's the thing. We often say, I am angry, I am upset, I'm stressed, I'm bored, I'm happy, I'm, all these different things. And the words that come after I am are really powerful because that's really what kind of creates our world. And what we need to understand is that we're not actually those emotions. We're just human beings having those emotions. And the beautiful thing is, as human beings, we have this huge range of emotions that we can go through, right? And the thing is, when you can put a name on an emotion you're experiencing, then all of a sudden you put a little bit of a distance. So let's say you're angry about something, you say, I'm really mad, right? But if you can just say, okay, I'm feeling mad. What am I mad about? You can just really start to back up and start to process that emotion in a way that is healthy for you. So it doesn't build up and cause stress and cause all these other things that start to end up happening there. So I use this joyometer in a way of making the invisible visible and really kind of to increase your self-awareness, to grow and develop yourself, to be able to, identify this. And it's kind of funny because I was at one of the events that the Inspiring Workplaces has several years ago, and I had an HR director come up. She was judging as well because I've been judging with them for many years. And she came up to me and she's like, oh, you're Karin Volo. I have your joyometer on my phone. I was like, wow, okay. And she checks in on a regular basis just to kind of see how am I feeling right now. And it's a good way to really, test yourself and see where you are. And I do believe that a lot of people have an emotional set point, a place where you often come back to. So just have this as an awareness. You can go and get it for free on our website there. I'll give you a place where you can get some other gifts at the end of this presentation as well. I used to talk about the 3 pillars of culture, and I've just this year added a 4th pillar, and I want to kind of take you through this because I've been doing this work for over a decade, and I wrote a book called Engage, and that kind of was the catalyst for me to start doing the work that I've been doing nowadays for so many years. And it was all about engagement, and you want to create an engaged environment where people can really thrive, and you want people who are aligned with the values, the vision, the mission, the purpose of the company, and that they want to make a difference, because if they have that kind of instilled in them, then they're going to be pretty engaged. What I also found in working with companies over so many years is that they have to have this bigger purpose and these living, breathing values, because when you have that, it's kind of the company as an organization, but that's the anchor that will kind of guide people, the compass that takes people forward together. Then what I found, and especially over the last 5 years, I've been pulled into working with trust so much because there's like this underlying level. If there's high levels of trust inside of an organization, it's so much easier to do the culture work because people are willing to take action and move things forward. So building, a foundation inside of the organization and building that culture around trust makes a huge difference. If it's a high trust organization, it is 300% more, they perform 300% better than low trust organizations. And the last pillar that I just added this year is basically leaders who care. And I've come to the realization in interviewing so many CEOs out there on my podcast, which is called the Amazing Leader Series, is that if the leaders truly care about the people and they're authentic with who they are, and they can build a strong connection and show that they really do care, it's so much easier to do everything else. So it's like now I have these 4 pillars of culture that I think are really vital. So basically, what do we need to do to create a thriving culture? And I think these are kind of the key things where I'm seeing at this point where we really need to focus in on. And the first is really having leaders that care. And it's really interesting because I've had so many people, and prior to the work I do now with cultures and helping companies keep their best people, I used to work in executive search and headhunting, and I used to take the best people out. And I've been told over my career of over 25 years now, something like that, that there were so many people who took their MBAs who felt like they had to unlearn what they learned in their MBAs. And I actually was having dinner recently with a Harvard professor from the MBA program, and we had a conversation about caring and how so many people feel like that's kind of educated out of them. And I asked her, I said, when is that going to change? Can you do something about this? And she was fully agreeing with me. And she said, oh, it's going to take some time. So I think we need to really focus in on developing leaders and helping them to understand, and especially with the COVID period that we had, that really shifted the world a lot because it came back to our empathy and our compassion for each other. And it was the first time we've ever experienced anything on a global basis where we all went through kind of a global trauma together. And so caring about people really became a high leadership quality that people wanted to see. And we've had, I sometimes call it the seismic shift in leadership. And I was talking to a CEO of a large international manufacturing company not so long ago, and we were talking about this, and he said, we're never going back to the way it was before. We're only going to be moving forward, and it's probably going to be even more of this. So not to kind of, focus so much on basically having leaders that care, but I think that really, it makes it so much easier. It's kind of like this domino effect that makes things so much better. Second point here is being purpose-driven. And I think on an individual basis, we need to be purpose-driven, and then also on a, obviously organizational level. And when you can have both of those aligning, where an individual has a higher purpose and also aligning it with a bigger purpose of the company, that's when you really get people like super excited about work. Building that high trust organization or that high trust culture, I've already talked about basically, and then developing your people. Where we are right now, in 2025, 75% of the workforce is going to be the millennials and the Gen Zs. They are the most educated, but the least experienced workforce we've ever experienced or had. So they need this development. And so it's really important to look at individuals as a whole and to inspire them and to, develop them as a professional, but also on a personal level. Because if you do that, it makes them feel connected to the company. It makes them loyal to the organization if you're investing in their development, and they're basically going to be able to thrive from there as well. So those are some key things that I'm finding right now. Things may change in the future. We never know, because remember, change is constant. So to kind of start to wrap this up a little bit, as I mentioned, our purpose is bringing joy to the workplace. And I love to give gifts. If you're watching this live, or if you're watching this from, the recording, you can go to evolution.com/gifts. You'll get access to the Joyometer, which I talked about a little bit earlier, as a tool that I love to give out, and access to reports. And I think there's a couple of masterclasses that are there as well. And, it's really about what we do, and the work that we do where we support leaders is about doing trainings where we are actually working with leaders, but also the whole organization, helping with strategies in terms of how do you do a cultural transformation. Because a lot of times I find leaders right now, they're struggling. They don't know how to, they want to do it, but they don't know how. And then also working, especially when you're merging and growing, especially in that rapid growth, there's so much happens when you're bringing multiple cultures in together. And if you've got this great culture and you're bringing in a lot of other companies, what happens is that the culture needs to shift, and it does shift, but it's hard to manage that because there's just a mix of so many different cultures. And then the last area that we work in is also with coaching, both executive and leadership coaching. So, basically what I want to just share here, and if I can get rid of the slides, I don't know how to do that. Maybe the tech people can do that. Um, yeah, thank you. So I can just wrap this up here. Um, you know, as an individual, we have the ability to make a difference in the workplace. And I really want you to feel inspired and know that you as an individual really can make a difference. And it's just about being proactive and choosing, number one, to develop yourself, focus on the things that you can manage so that you don't feel too overwhelmed or stressed or uncertain about things, and then connecting with people on a heart to heart basis. If you have a great team and you really care about each other, that takes care of so many of the problems. And I come back so often that, all of these problems that we're facing in the world, so much of it would be solved by just being kind. Like, be nice to each other, have respect for each other, listen to each other, have good conversations. It's okay to not agree on everything. Don't have to go attacking other people because of that.